This is Popping the Bubbl with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
My name is Elissa, and you are listening to Popping the Bubbl.
I am so excited to have you on our show, Popping the Bubbl, today. Elissa, you have been working in the startup world as a founder, an entrepreneur for many years, and you just recently had a collection of stories written by women about their experiences in technology called Lean Out. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to decide to write this book, this really important book about women in technology and their experiences.
Yeah, I decided to write a book about women in tech because my own experiences had been so challenging. I was approached by so many journalists, and I felt like they were trying to fit my story into their story. Now I appreciate the press, and I was glad for the attention, but I realized that women's stories weren't really being told in an authentic and unedited way, and our stories were important. So I put out a call to all of the women in tech who would listen to me, which at the time wasn't that many people. I wasn't all that well known at the time. Anyone who I could reach, I asked if they wanted to contribute, and I didn't know what I would find. I came into the project with a tremendously open mind. I didn't have an agenda or a narrative. My only interest was in authentic, unedited storytelling, something raw and real. And I was amazed at what came in. The stories that came in were heartbreaking. And it made for a wonderful book. Lean Out is real and raw and moving and absolutely tells the story of what's really going on in Silicon Valley. I'm so proud of the writers. I'm so proud that I managed to make this happen. But it wasn't what I expected. I was looking for uplifting stories. When I put together Lean Out, I was in a great place in my life. I had been the CEO of Glimpse. And when you are CEO, you are in charge. And it's the best. You know, reporters had come to me asking about a time when I'd been harassed and hoping that I would have a story about PAX. And the truth is, as the CEO, if anything, you are the harasser.
Right.
You know, I remember having conversations with PAX about how, like, we weren't going to hit on the interns because, you know, that was inappropriate. And I felt strongly about that. I felt very strongly about never sexually harassing anyone in my organization. It meant a lot to me to try and treat everyone as well as possible. So I think I was overall a fair founder, and it meant a lot to me to be good to people, but I certainly wasn't being harassed at work. Not really. Right. Not in any meaningful ways. Pax was very respectful, and he gave me...
Who's Pax? That's your co-founder?
That was my co-founder at the time, and people thought that he was like a sexist Brogrammer, and he's certainly tweeting some objectionable things now, and he knows that we had a conversation about that. He knows that we disagree on some of these things now, but he was extremely respectful to me. So I didn't even know what was happening because it had been so long since I'd been in an office, and I'd been a founder for so long. I'd been my own boss. When you're your own boss, it's easy in a lot of ways. But these stories came in about what it's like to work at startups, what it's like to work for other people, what it's like to be in the gaming industry just trying to fit in. I learned quite a bit from that. I realized that things were not very rosy, and I went through this transformational journey. People who read Lean Out, they read it in like a few days, and they go through this kind of dark experience of living in those stories. And I lived in those stories for months. I became very depressed.
Was there one story in particular that impacted you? Because I know what you were saying about the book really starting out with very impactful story. I think it was Sunny Allen spoke about her experience with Hacker Dojo, also her experience with her boyfriend, and just the rough life of coming to San Francisco and really not making very much money and having to live in this very expensive world. That really just kind of hit me in the face. Any particular story that really stood out to you in terms of being representative of what women go through in technology?
I love Sunny Allen's story so much. I find it to be so beautifully written, and I am so inspired by how she wrote it. She's so vulnerable, and the way she writes the story, she's like willing to be judged. And that was something that I was wrestling with, how to tell stories that were authentic and true, but where I maybe didn't look as good as I'd want to look.
She really does.
And Sunny just lays it all out there. And it's remarkable. It's the piece that hits me the hardest when I read Lean Out. But when I think about what's representative, I think about a piece like the one that Squinky published that talks about how doing the work isn't what's hard, it's fitting in.
And tell us about Squinky.
And I always felt that, so Squinky is someone who identifies as being non-gender binary, someone who doesn't want to be referred to as him or as her. And Squinky is a brilliant indie game dev who gave this talk to standing ovation. And I asked Squinky if I could publish it. And the piece is all about how the hardest thing sometimes is just fitting in. People talk about how doing the work is the hard part, especially in startups. They talk about how getting traction is hard, or how, making the code is hard. And that just was not my experience. I was always able to excel at doing the work. I had 10% week over week traction with Glimpse, with sorority girls, which is considered extraordinary. That's like a very big accomplishment. But we still didn't get funding. Like, we still ran into all of these issues. And that was because of the interpersonal stuff. That was because I would show up and pitch, and one set of VCs would say that I was too confident, and another set would say I wasn't confident enough. And so, as a woman, you have to walk this line that is so fine.
I know, we get so many mixed messages.
And you're expected to walk this line that is so fine it doesn't even exist. You know what I mean? I can show up and do whatever you need me to do. I'm good. I'm really good at my work. But it's like, no matter what you do, it's not quite right. And that's because we still haven't become comfortable, that is, we Silicon Valley as a community and as a culture, with the women who are in charge. When I show up and I'm confident, that's a little uncomfortable. When I show up and I'm not confident, well, that's not good either. So that really spoke to me when Squinky wrote this piece about how it's not doing the work that's hard. I've always been able to do the work, and I've been really good at it. And that's true for many, many, many underrepresented people in technology and in gaming. What's hard is showing up and being accepted for who we are.
What would you say is the culture of Silicon Valley? If it's hard to be accepted.
Oh, that's a great question. Accepted? Well, it used to be easier. In 2012, 2013, there was this Brogrammer culture that worked really well for people who fit in there. And that was led by Paul Graham and people like Peter Thiel. And it was based on Mark Zuckerberg's ideology and what he looked like. And that's all that was based on this fantasy of Mark Zuckerberg. I think Paul Graham is like a weird man crush on him. If you ever see Paul Graham talking about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, it's a little weird, because there are so many talented people, but Paul Graham has fetishized Mark Zuckerberg in this way that makes me uncomfortable to watch.
I don't think he's the only one. I mean, Mark is a bit of a celebrity superstar, and he does embody that Brogrammer, the guy that dropped out of, was it Stanford that he dropped out of to start his company? And that really fits the profile of what a lot of VCs look for when they're looking to fund. I mean, actually, didn't one of those guys actually even say it flat out?
Yeah, John Jers said that. And
that's right.
I wrote about that in Lean Out, about how VCs like John Jers used to just come out and say that they were looking for white male nerds. And now they can't say that anymore. And so that speaks to the culture and where we're at now. In 2012 and 2013, which was like the height of when I was trying to break into Silicon Valley and before I'd become known at all, the Brogrammer culture was really central, and people weren't very conflicted about that. Now you have women of color and feminists and men who also don't fit in. You have all of these other kinds of people coming in and saying that this isn't good enough. We need to be inclusive here in Silicon Valley. And so things are being shaken up, and we're at a moment culturally where things are hard and awkward for just about everyone. Now, things are easier for the people who already have money and good jobs. So let's be clear, like hard for everyone is not evenly distributed, but we are at a moment now where someone who is, for example, a white male CTO in charge of a well-funded company is uncomfortable and awkwardly trying to navigate at the same time that a woman of color may be struggling to be taken seriously. Now, I'm more sympathetic to the people of color who should be taken seriously and are not than I am to the people who are awkwardly trying to navigate their privilege. But I do have sympathy that this cultural shift is hard on everyone. And I think that's important. I think it's important to recognize that everyone is having a hard time now.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think it really needs to happen for us to go beyond this lip service and to really embrace diversity? What, you talk about having companies make people like Swinky fit in, but what actually needs to be done? What do you think from a tactical level needs to change?
It's such a mess. And I do see a lot about what we can do tactically that might end up being the topic of one of my next books. There are so many things that companies like Facebook and Google could do to improve their overall diversity numbers. An easy first step, for example, would be for Google to reopen an office in Atlanta where there is a higher concentration of diverse applicants.
Yes.
If Facebook's headquarters is in Menlo Park, of course that's going to make it harder to recruit diverse people because, who wants to live in Menlo Park in the first place, let alone do you want to be the only Black man living in Menlo Park? I mean, maybe there are 10. I don't know the actual demographics, but try opening an office in Harlem, right? Or just look across the country. Where are the people who are trying to reach? Where do they live? Uber is opening an office in Oakland. Oakland is a more comfortable place for people of color to live than Menlo Park, or certainly for me, right? I'm used to living in Queens. I don't think anyone's comfortable living in Menlo Park. I really don't mean to single out people of color, be people of color are not comfortable. No, nobody's comfortable. But some people are more uncomfortable than others. And we can acknowledge that, and we can start building the headquarters for our companies in places where the communities look like the people we're trying to recruit. And we certainly can stop saying that those people aren't there. I think that, I'm personally okay with the notion that certain kinds of change will take time. I accept that. I try to be a reasonable business person. What I don't accept is saying things that are untrue and hurtful and entirely unnecessary. So what I'm seeing companies like Google and Twitter and Facebook do is say that people of color aren't qualified, that they don't exist, say that women aren't qualified, and ask if there are even any women here. That's very offensive to me. I am here for the most part either not being recruited or recruited badly. My job interviews at Google were extremely awkward because I ended up being pushed through to interview for jobs I had not applied for and did not have appropriate qualifications for.
Oh, wow. That happened?
When I wasn't. Oh, yeah. And I get the sense that that's very normal because you apply for a job and maybe they don't want you where you applied, but they circulate your resume to jobs that are similar.
And
then you get a call
to fill the diversity quota?
No, this isn't because of diversity. This is just how their recruiting goes.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who is so qualified that I think he's verified on Twitter. He's very qualified in his field, very well respected. He said it took him 4 times applying to Google before he got in. So I think that there are people, like my friend who happens to be white and male, who are more willing to go through what can often be a messy and not very respectful and really painful recruiting process. That process ends up feeling so much worse when you're already marginalized in the industry because we're used to women are used to being disrespected so often that we just
that is so sad.
It's so sad, but it's I can only take so much of that. And so I'm going to avoid bringing any more of that into my life than I need to. And women, it's already so hard for women and people of color to be taken seriously when we do apply. And so if we're it's just, I know I'm rambling because I'm so upset. I'll take a step back and say this. that the thing that would be satisfying for me now would be for companies like Facebook and Google to just say, we're not good at this yet. We are trying. We will get there. We are new openings for people who will come on board and be leaders in diversity and inclusion. Those jobs are new. These programs are new. We are trying. We know that you're out there and we know that we suck at finding you. We know that, like, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear Facebook and Google and Twitter just take responsibility and say, we're not good at this yet. And we still have a lot of assholes in our company who will make it hard for underrepresented people who come here. Like, I think of the person who discouraged me from applying to Google. He was at the time a low-level manager at Google, working at YouTube specifically, and he told me not to apply to Google. He said that Google only hires the best.
Wow.
And he told me to not apply. Now, this was after 15 years working in the industry.
Unbelievable.
He didn't tell me don't apply to be a director. He said don't apply at all. And I had worked at Everyday Health, which went on to IPO. I had run my own software development firm.
I hope you're not in contact with this person still.
No, his therapist told him to block me, I think because he was very obsessive about me. This same person, this person who told me not so long ago that I couldn't even apply to Google even at a junior level, even after so many years in the industry. This person is now leading many cultural efforts inside Google. This is very important. It is going to take a very long time for people like that to no longer be in these leadership roles inside these companies. And so we can't expect Facebook, Twitter, and Google to become diverse and inclusive overnight. They still have assholes in charge, and it's hard to fire these people. You know, they're doing good work in their other capacities. They just happen to be people who express misogyny or racism. And we aren't yet at a place where we know how to remove those people. An expression of misogyny or racism has to be very explicit in order for a person to be removed from their job. And so you have all of these people who are, in small ways, really preventing their companies from becoming inclusive places, but not in big enough ways where we can get rid of them. And so it's going to take a long time. And I think we may need to just set up other offices, right? Like, I like the idea of Google setting up just a new office in Atlanta where you don't already have assholes. Like, how great would that be? Like, I want to go work at I love Facebook for what it's worth. Like, I've had great experiences with the people there. And I'm actually extremely optimistic about Google. I think Google is very sincere in doing, like, tremendously cool work, innovating in diversity. I would love to go work at one of those companies at some new office with just new people.
Yeah, I mean, that would do so much for the culture, for the community. I just imagine a Facebook or a Google office in Atlanta. And
that's right.
Just, yeah, I mean, again, the importance of bringing those voices into the product itself, the way that you're building the product, the way that you're communicating product features on the marketing side, having some kind of impact in how you talk to the community, those communities, is so important to have those voices represented. So I think that'd be a great first start, most definitely.
Is it fair to say that the culture of Google, Facebook, Twitter, whoever it is, I mean, the Bay Area is a diverse place. Menlo Park, I wouldn't want to live there either. It's basically, landfill on a swamp. So, but East Palo Alto's 10 minutes away, and that's a black community. Oakland still is only a regular commute away. What prevents, and look, let's be honest, if you walk around Palo Alto in general, you will see a very diverse population. Where does it break down? I mean, if they say, let me back up, let me ask you this. I've looked at some of the things you've posted on LinkedIn as far as recruiting goes and everything, and you talk about how it's broken. And I admit, it's very tough. You've had interviews at Google, right? I've applied for jobs at Google that I was perfectly qualified for and never even got a response. So how does someone on the outside who's fighting this perception and this feeling of not being wanted, how do they get in? I mean, you have a lot of influence. How does someone who has less influence get in?
That's a really tough problem. And I've been thinking about that so much and so hard. I think it has informed the work that I've chosen to do. You know, my job right now is managing director at Kearney Boyle and Associates, where I'm focusing on executive search and on diversity and inclusion. So I am running a search right now for a company in Boston who's looking for an engineering manager, and they care a lot about diversity. What I can do there is I can really scout out and look for talented people who are underrepresented, who a company like Google or Facebook may not take the time or the energy or figure out how to reach. And I can connect with those people and find them wonderful jobs. That's like what I'm doing on my day to day. And I feel really optimistic about that. Now, it doesn't scale, but it's a start.
No.
And so I'm hoping that ambitious people who find themselves like not properly recognized by companies like Google and Facebook will connect with me and say, like, this is who I am, this is what I do, and that we'll be able to figure out, like, what are the companies that are actually diverse and inclusive, and for people like me to be connectors there. That's actually the place where I'm optimistic for the industry. It is going to take a long time for these big companies to become the diverse and inclusive places that we want them to be. But there are smaller companies right now that are already there. You know, we talk about the industry like Silicon Valley, like it's one place. And sometimes I wonder who we're concerned about. You know, like I hear the VPs and directors at companies like Google and Facebook, and they seem concerned about their pipeline and they just want to get more people in. For me, I'm concerned about the people who are already here. That's who and what I care about the most. I care about the people who are here, who are talented, who want to work, and they're not finding their place and they're not finding good experiences, and we are just failing them. And I think that that's a shame. And that's a shame for all the reasons why we want talented people here. So I think short term, the solution is for the truly wonderful, truly inclusive, diverse companies to connect with recruiters like me who will recognize underrepresented talent, and for those people to all meet and just like create the best companies and make Google and Facebook so jealous.
So, Elissa, I'll play the game with you. This is a project that I'm actually working on right now in the exact same vein. And we've talked for, 20 some odd minutes. And not once has the word veteran come out of anybody's mouth. And that's not an indictment of you or me, Sandra, or anything. I'm a veteran, by the way. So here we have people that transition out with legitimate professional level skills, multiple degrees, and they can't get an interview. I've put in my resume, back when I was looking for jobs, I put my resume within every recruiter that did something akin to what I could do. And I got no jobs. I got one hit from someone to recognize what I did in the Army because their brother had done it, and they got me a temp job making $15 an hour. That led to a company that was ultimately going out of business. So if I bring to you this problem, we don't even consider veterans. I talk to people all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, that's right. Veterans are a big issue. So veterans tie into ageism, which is also a big issue. And I worry about this. I worry about this a little separate from the way that I worry about the treatment of women and people of color, because there's a very specific kind of bias and kind of mistreatment that I'm seeing along those demographic lines. And
again, real quick, I've been told to not put my military experience on my resume.
I'm not surprised about that. Now, it depends where you're applying, but Silicon Valley is a place that has a certain set of values. And when those companies look for cultural fit, that's part of what they're looking for. Now, a lot of founders don't have military experience and may or may not approve of military interventions, and they may be confused by military experience. Where I've been working in the security industry, there are a lot of people with military experience. That's very common. But you hit on something important, which is that diversity is about a lot of things. It's about more than gender. It's about more than color. It encompasses ableism and disability and ageism and just a willingness to accept people from different backgrounds. I think that's the biggest thing. There's been this homogeneity where someone from MIT or Stanford would hire someone else who they knew from MIT or Stanford, and then they'd have a referral program, and you end up with a very homogenous culture that misses a lot. You end up with products that miss a lot that matters to the demographics of the United States, and we end up solving smaller problems than we could. So I worry about veterans because they're one of those groups that's not even talked about when we talk about diversity.
Right.
And I worry about veterans because they have gone out and they have served their country as best as they could. And if in some cases the wars were unjust, that is not on the veterans, that is on the elected officials who, created those wars. The veterans went out and they fought and they served, and they came home and they found not much waiting for them. I think that fixing things for veterans is likely a policy problem before it's a Silicon Valley problem, because I think that the government owes veterans. That's why. Because I think that...
Doesn't Silicon Valley owe veterans, though, also? I mean, if they care about veterans, we all say, thank you for your service, right? And I'm pushing back just because I'm passionate about, as much as you're passionate about females, I'm passionate about veterans. And if I have to be looked at as someone who has to work in the security industry, what if I have a master's degree in, computer science and I can't even get an interview? 22 veterans a day kill themselves. So we have an issue that's a social issue. It's a policy issue for sure too, but we can't wait for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton to fix this stuff. We've got to handle it at the CEO level and at the recruiter level. And if it's not even being discussed, then we've got to have a grassroots and a policy thing. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say that the solution ideally would come from industry as well. The difference is, if someone has been out of the field, it depends what your work has been in the military, but if you take even 6 months out, then you're behind in a way that is significant. And we start having to take a step back. And I would say it this way. We've done a lot of work recently in Silicon Valley to make sure that women and other underrepresented groups have access to trainings and to skills. And so right now we have women and people of color who are already ready to work tomorrow. What I would want to understand with veterans is, do we need to look at skill retraining because they've been out of work for 6 months or more? Or are we looking at people?
Right, getting them into the
Yeah, and I think the difference is that the government really does more directly owe veterans than they do, say, women and people of color, in my opinion. I think that it would be more straightforward to create some kind of program where people do military service and there is some kind of government program that is responsible for those people financially or in terms of their jobs. That seems like a very straightforward thing that we should have had in place many, many years ago.
Absolutely. And getting retrained for re-entry into civilian and corporate life. And I think part of also, what you mentioned, your friend that had applied at Google several times, whereas you went through the process once and you got funneled into this weird direction. I wonder if people that tend to be in a marginalized sector, such as women, minorities, and I think even veterans probably come across this now with some form of rejection that they face along the way. You start to recoil a bit. Is it a matter of personal perseverance and, just being committed to finding a way to connect with the right person in the company? And, if Google is a place you really want to work, then do you just knock down every door that you can to try to get in? I mean, I think that, men, maybe these guys that are graduating from MIT and Stanford, they've got a little bit of an easier path in, but, if they don't take no for an answer and they just keep going.
Right. Well, I'd like to take a different step back since we started on this veteran track. It's hard enough for women to stand up for themselves for many reasons. Women stand up and we're told to sit back down. And what we're seeing now is women and people of color and LGBTQ and other underrepresented groups standing up and saying, we want to be counted, we want to be included, we want to be part of this. And all too often, like, the response is, well, what about men? And I do think that that's a problematic response. It's like Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. Like, I'm here and I'm an advocate for women, and that should be okay. I don't think that it should be considered problematic that I'm showing up and advocating for the group that I am part of, which is a group that really desperately needs for things to change. I'm not saying that other groups aren't important. Me especially, right? Like, I had friends in Gamergate. A lot of my friends are men who are concerned about men's issues. And I'm so sympathetic. And I try to build coalitions and work together. And if someone from a veterans group wanted to work with me, I would absolutely be down for that. But I do want to be clear. I think it should be okay for me to step up and say, like, I'm working with women and this is what we have to say.
Yeah, I agree with you too, 100%. I mean, you have to have champions for the different causes. Black lives, blue lives, all lives, whichever champion it is, they need someone who creates the impetus for change. I think absolutely. Actually, I saw Amanda Kalo. She talked the other day at a conference I was at, and she said, "There's
She's the CEO of 6 Sense."
Yeah, and there's 1% of me. Like, I'm it. And goodness gracious, that can't be how it is. We have to do better than that.
Yeah,
we have to. And she's super brilliant. And if there's one of her, there should be 1,000 more of her around. She shouldn't be the one going to conferences by herself as a female. It should absolutely be different than that. So I'm 100% on your side. Yes, of course. Hey, I really
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm on yours too. I really am. And, you know, maybe we can connect after this and think about, I think
maybe there's a collaboration there.
Sure. I've actually written a paper on female empowerment that's about to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. I've spent time trying to figure out.
You're a father of a daughter.
I'm a father of a daughter. Yeah. She needs a job. Get my daughter a job. Matter of fact, really, no, seriously, get her a job.
So what do you think, you know, kind of getting back to Lean Out, I think that there's so much there. And I think that, you know, an interesting take, because, you know, we do hear about, Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. So how is Lean Out different than Lean In? You know, we've all had a chance to maybe read parts and pieces of it and react and, you know, see if that was really an experience that was something that we can relate to. I mean, personally for myself, I haven't ever had a partner that has been able to support me in the way that Sheryl Sandberg's husband did. You know, talk a little bit about her experience with Lean In and how you contrast that with the Lean Out.
Yeah, you know, I'm so grateful to Sheryl Sandberg for being one of the first women in her position to really champion feminism. I think that was just awesome. And Sheryl Sandberg spoke from her own point of view, which is very reasonable. But because there were so few people championing feminine leadership and women leadership, Sheryl came to speak for, like, all women. Right. And no one person can speak for a group that big. And so Sheryl Sandberg rightfully came under criticism for the limitations of her point of view. I find all of that to be really messy, because she did us a great service by making the first step and starting the conversation. And then now it's on the rest of us to build on that conversation and make it more inclusive and reflective of everything that's happening. What Lean Out brings to the table is so many points of view. That makes Lean Out a very special book. And the concept of leaning out just feels very right to people right now. You know, how many of us women have been the only woman in a room full of men, spoken our opinion, and either been ignored or bullied or just, like, not had the greatest experience. Sheryl Sandberg has managed to become chief operating officer at Facebook, but I actually imagine she's had quite a few negative experiences being such a strong woman leader. We don't hear about it, but I have moments where I actually feel bad for Sheryl Sandberg, thinking of her like in that room with like Peter Thiel and they're arguing like, oh man. So I'm just picturing the like Facebook board meetings. It's like, oh man, like she can keep it. And for me, I have these moments where it's just not, it feels like it's not working, to lean in. And leaning out is like, we're going to do it our way. That it has been long enough with people telling women that they need to change in order to fit in. And that's the lean in message. Lean in's message is that women need to learn how to speak so men will hear them.
Right. Exactly.
Lean out is about the notion that companies want us, or they should want us, and that they need to learn how to make us welcome and make us want to be there.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that's a change too, because companies now have to pay lip service to this idea of diversity. And if they're saying that they want to hire and include women, for example, well, then they need to make their companies places where women want to work. I think that's great.
What would they do? So what are some of the things that companies should be doing?
Oh, well, that's really hard. I'd say at the start, they just need to eliminate the worst behavior. We talk about things like being more friendly to mothers, having rooms where women can nurse, having better parental leave. But the truth is, all of that is important, but those aren't the biggest reasons why women leave. Women leave because they've been like sexually harassed or raped at work. There's a woman in Lean Out who writes about, she suggests that she was raped at Google.
Wow.
And I was bullied. There is a person right now trying to bully me out of the tech industry.
Wow.
And I'm not going anywhere. I'm very fortunate that there are a number of people at my back, that I work at a wonderful company right now. I'm in this fantastic position leading these new divisions. I have all these publishers who want to work with me, and I travel all over the world giving talks. Like, I'm not going anywhere because one guy thinks he can bully me out of the industry, but like, that's why women leave.
Right.
Like, there's a very powerful person right now saying things that aren't like trying to gather, like, it's bad.
That's
And
horrible. I'm sorry.
well, I'm sorry too, but I'm actually glad for it because it gives me some empathy and some insight into what is actually going on for other people. And the reason is I'm already a prominent, outspoken feminist who like is clearly a very strong person. And like my dad like studied with Bruce Lee's people. Like, people should not be messing with me. Like, it's not smart. Like, it's not smart. Like, why? Like, you shouldn't mess with me.
Hell
like, do you
no.
know who has my back? Like, the scariest people in the world are like feel protective of me. Like one of the leaders in the gun lobby is one of my best friends. Like, I would not mess with me. And that gives me a lot of insight into what other people go through, because it's the most vulnerable people who actually get attacked and bullied the most. So if this is how people treat me,
right,
it gives me a lot of insight into what other people go through, people who are more vulnerable, people who don't have as many options. And it tells me this is why people leave. People leave because there are incidents and moments that are so bad that they just can't see a path for themselves anymore. If I was sexually harassed at Google, I've never worked there, so that was not my experience. But there are people who have been and who've reported it and tweeted about it, talked about it. If that was my experience and I went to HR and HR was unhelpful, Kelly Ellis talks about this. She's well known for this, that she was sexually harassed at Google, treated inappropriately. She went to HR and HR blamed her and promoted the men.
Wow.
Now,
but
if that was my
story, we hear about
it's a
that all the
common
time.
story. It's a common story. So if that was my story, how would I feel about staying in the industry? I think about women who've experienced this and how did they evaluate their job options? Where did they go and work after that? Google is supposed to be one of the best places and they have an HR department. So where do you go?
Right.
This is why people leave the industry, and this is the change that has to happen. We have to find a way to stop the worst actors.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, for sure. You shouldn't have to worry about getting bullied or raped at work. I mean, that's we should be past that point.
We should.
That's exactly right.
So what's next for you, Elissa? So you've written this great book and getting it promoted far and wide, and I think it spreads a great message and is really inspiring for other women to, be strong and insist on getting accepted in the workforce. I mean, I think that's maybe more of the lean in message as well. What's next for you, and how do you intend to help women and these disenfranchised voices get into technology?
I'm very excited about Lean Out, and I've been invited by some companies to give talks related to Lean Out. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I encourage people to invite me if you would like me to give a talk at your school or at your company. I have a new agent, Melissa Broadway, and she is handling all the logistics. So that's one thing. I'm also working on my next book, 2 books actually. I'm working on my memoirs, which are my personal stories of what I've experienced in tech. And I'm also working on a book similar to Lean Out, and it focuses on the things that people don't say, the people who we are often not hearing. So I would like to meet with people who are in the prison system and to share some of their stories. I actually think that a story from a veteran would be really, really good. So maybe we can connect around that. So I'm just starting the process of seeking submissions, and I'm super excited. I think I feel most alive when I'm reading a new story, like something heartfelt. So that is just the most exciting thing in the world to me, that I'm able to make these books. And then I just started at Kearney Boyle and Associates. That is a fairly new job for me. I am launching these 2 new divisions, executive search and diversity and inclusion. And I have the full support of the team, all the resources from this great company. So I'm really optimistic that will make a difference. And I'm looking for new clients because we're still kind of new. So I have a little bit of bandwidth. Like I'm working on some searches, but I could take on probably 1 or 2 more. So if companies want to find, really fantastic people who are maybe not the folks you're seeing normally, or who fit in as underrepresented, I'm really excited about being able to make those connections.
Yeah, and we're happy to post links to your site, your contact information, to make sure that we do our part to help get you in touch with those candidates and companies.
That would be great. I think that's how we're going to change the industry. I say this not because it's my job, because there are a lot of things that I could be doing day to day. I really think that the way for the tech ecosystem to get better is just to hire and promote more underrepresented people, and for those companies to be really successful. And then, Google and Facebook will get jealous. That's how it'll go. So I really appreciate your support too. I think as a young woman, I had to prove myself really, really hard, and people didn't take me seriously. And now people are not only taking me seriously, but they're reading what I'm publishing, and they're hiring me, and they're bringing me on podcasts like this. And I can't tell you how much that means. I wish I could tell the younger version of me, that it's all going to work out.
What we were talking about earlier, to just continue being ballsy, which I just love you saying that.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I'm just like a startup bro, except I'm not.
A friend of the show, a guy named Anthony Iannarino, he's a speaker, sales guy, and he says over and over again, write 500 words and publish them every day, and your life will change. And the things that you want will come to you. So
that is so true.
Yeah, you just keep on writing, keep that voice going. Oh, tell us where we can reach you on Twitter, because that's the great way for people to find you.
Twitter is one of the best ways to find me, and my direct messages are open, so anyone can send me a message there. My handle is @ElissaBeth. That is ELISSABETH.
Wonderful. Well, Elissa, it has been awesome having you on. This has been such a great conversation, such a needed conversation for us to really get out there. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Yes, thank you. This was great, and I look forward to hearing the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, let's do it again, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Definitely.